Hello, my name is David Belcher. I am the lead pastor at Lake Chelan Bible Church, and this video is a video for the Assemblies of God Network to teach a class on a spirit-filled church. Since being a pastor, and even before I was a pastor, I would often hear people talk about the importance of needing to have a spirit-filled church. And despite how sincere the people may have been about wanting to have a spirit-filled church, very often their definition of that was some type of historic perspective that they had on what that looked like, maybe when they first got saved, or some experience that they had when they were a kid. But there wasn't ever a definitive pattern for how to demonstrate and have a spirit-filled church. In the following teaching, I'm going to show you the pattern throughout the book of Acts of what shows and builds a spirit-filled church. It's what's called the Acts 2 model. In this model, we have one consistent pattern that happens throughout the book of Acts through people such as Peter, Philip, and the Apostle Paul. In Matthew chapter 16, Jesus tells the Apostle Peter, then disciple Peter, that I will build my church. And just prior to him telling Peter this, he tells him what he will build his church on. It will be the profession of faith in Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ saves sinners for eternity. That is the profession of faith that Jesus Christ is going to build his church on. But you might say, what is the method and the model for this happening in? Throughout the book of Acts and any other place in the Bible, and any place since then through church history, the model that this has always been built upon has been biblical preaching. Let me show you a quick pattern of this real quick. In Acts chapter 2, the Apostle Peter preaches the book of Joel chapter 2, and 3,000 people believe. In Acts chapter 3, Peter preaches Deuteronomy chapter 18 and Genesis chapter 20, and healings and blessings and believers come to Christ. In Acts chapter 4, Peter preaches again. He preaches Christ, and the congregation of the early church is solidified. In Acts chapter 6, Stephen preaches. And then in Acts chapter 8, Philip preaches. And there's another revival that occurs. These bubbles of revival occur throughout the book of Acts, and they all are begin with the foundation of biblical preaching. The only common theme throughout the book of Acts that demonstrates a spirit-filled church is biblical preaching. This is seen even in the beginning of the Bible through the patriarchs, to the middle of the Bible through the prophets, and even today through pastors. From Acts chapter 9 through Acts chapter 28, you see one consistent ministry of the Apostle Paul. It's preaching the Word of God. Throughout the entire book of Acts, he goes from town to town preaching the hope of salvation in Jesus Christ. Despite all of the modern methods that are attempted to be used to build churches, and very often they will build an organization, and though those organizations may use modern methods to build, they do not demonstrate a biblically spirit-filled church. Despite those methods, there is one timeless method for building a spirit-filled church. It's Bible preaching. And at that, I'm going to close with this. There's often two methods or two categories to approach this in. The first method would be what you could call a budget, baptisms, and buildings, where people put their focus on the budget, the money, whether or not people are being baptized, and how the building looks. And people today might say that that's the old-fashioned way. But what I would say is that's never been the way. That's just a modern American invention that needs to be administered in the church. However, the timeless way has always been building the people. The people have always been the ministry of the church, not the money, not a baptism, and not even the building. And the only way that Jesus said in his high priestly prayer in John 17, he said that his intention is that the people would be built by the preaching of the word. He prayed to God that we would sanctify his people with the truth, and his word is truth.